What's up, Bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Mark Stevens. My second time talking to him. We're talking about his book, No Lie Lasts Forever. That book comes out on June 1st. I loved chatting with Mark again. He's always so fun to talk to. It's just so fun to pick his brain about because the first book I read from him, it was not a thriller, but I guess thriller is his thing. So him coming back to thriller and No Lie Lasts Forever is a thriller. So it was really cool, kind of like getting to know him as a writer and how he's kind of developed over the years and how he feels going back to a genre that he's been doing. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Mark Stevens. So today we've got Mark Stevens. We're talking about his book, No Lie Lasts Forever. That is available on June 1st. Mark, thanks for joining me. Nice to see you again. Nice to read a little bit something different because I think last time we talked about the fireballer. So I'm interested to see what this one was going to bring to me in my brain, and I appreciated the opportunity. So I'm happy to dive a little bit deeper today.
Great to be here. Thanks a million.
Mhm. To get started, can you share a summary of, and then we'll try to be spoiler free through the conversation, but so that people can follow along, could you share like a summary of the book?
Sure, I'll do my best. It's really a story about two different characters. One is a retired serial killer. He's been inactive for about 15 years and has never been caught, of course. And the other major character is a television reporter, a female television reporter, all set in Denver. And she makes a big mistake during a high profile moment on live TV. And her station puts her out, suspends her temporarily, and puts her out on the street, so to speak, while they sort through all the public relations issues with her mistake. And those are the two main characters. And the flash incident that kind of gets the story going is after 15 years of being off and not doing any more of his violent things, there's a brand new serial killer case that is done and looks every bit like one of the retired serial killers' old approaches to how he would kill. And so the story becomes a case of mutual redemption because he needs his reputation back, or thinks he does. She needs her job back, and he finds a way to contact her and get things going because he knows if he can have her ask the right questions and go after the case, then he can get his name back and she can get her job back. So that's the idea.
Yeah, it was crazy how you wove all of that together, and it was unlikely. It was really a cool concept, like unlikely, where oh, hell no, you're not gonna ruin my legacy. He's got to set the record straight. And she's in a tough spot because what does she do? Like, he's a wanted like criminal like for decades he was never or for years he was never found. And so I thought that was like so cool. I think I like for even from I kind of want to explore like how did you decide to go in the direction of where he's obviously kind of like content warnings he's a messed up individual. Obviously, how did you explore his personality? And because we readers, you give readers the point of view of the killer, of the guy. And so I thought it was interesting. I want to explore how you got in the mindset, how you decided to take that his personality in that route, like how you got into the mind of writing from his point of view. Because when I was first the concept of the story, I was thinking like, oh, he's maybe trying to do some good. He's trying to help, but it's no, he's messed up in the head. So like, I thought that was a really interesting take on like this reluctant partnership. I kind of want to explore like how you navigated that and how you figured that out.
Wow. First of all, thank you for the thoughtful read. I obviously can tell you have read it, and I would love that phrase, reluctant partnership. I'm going to use that going forward.
Sure.
Can
Give
I
that to you
steal
for
it?
free.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. It's ultra reluctant partnership, and I think one of the things that I think makes it work, I hope it makes it work, I should say, is before I answer your question, I think one of the things I hope makes it work is the fact that she spends the first quarter of the book or so disbelieving that this guy is actually who he says he is. And I think he finds a pretty frightening way to prove to her that it's him. I won't go into detail. In approaching writing him, and his name is Harry Kugel, he's a state, basically wanted to treat him like any other character and give him his full due as a person. He wants to like anybody else, I think, no matter whether it's a bad or a good reputation, you want to keep your story intact in the public's eye. And I think I just wanted to approach him like I would anybody else and just understand all his likes, all his dislikes, just as a person before we even talk about his obviously incredibly psychopathic need to kill, which he's been able to squelch for 15 years and keep off to the side. And I think in some ways it's a metaphor for maybe on hopefully on a much, much lesser scale. We've all done something in our past that we are very happy we could move past and that we didn't hurt us long term, that the bulk of our actions through life have redeemed who we are, and at least obviously his crimes were incredibly egregious and etc. But he's no different than a lot of us in terms of trying to maintain a public profile. Nobody knows it's him, but the story that's out there, the legend, is what he wants to maintain.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, like, you do have to fully flesh out all the characters and really know the motivation off. What would this type of event do to them? Like, in what context are their background and what's going on through their head and why are they doing things the way that they do it? And so even with through all that, it's like probably pages and pages of details, but that's not the meat of it, right? The meat is the story. Still have to flesh all that out in your brain or elsewhere, post-it notes, I don't know, whatever, like before you get down to writing your story, because that's definitely his background. It's interesting, but it's not like it's just a part of the story and a part of the timeline and a part of the big picture. So yeah, so going into, I'll hop back a little bit because you are used to writing thrillers, right? Because you got a handful of published works, and most of them are thrillers. I think The Fireballer was, like, the only
Exception.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever, I don't know what genre you like, literary fiction, or I don't know what you would consider that. I don't It reminds me of, like, maybe women's fiction, but, for a man,
Yeah.
because it's characterization, it's very character
Right.
driven. I wanna explore, like, how did you approach this story the same way that you approach, like, previous thrillers? Was there any big lessons learned? Did you find anything new, or what draws you to the genre in general, stuff like that?
The truth, what's quirky and true about No Lie Lasts Forever is actually it's a project that I started working on about 24 years ago. I really always saw myself as a crime fiction writer. When I wrote No Lie Lasts Forever for the first time, it was 6 years before I would get published with my first mystery in 2007. I had already had three completed projects, three standalone novels that I got good agents for in New York and had lots of hope. And I feel like I was close to breaking through and getting published. Nothing happened with that. And when I came up with the idea for No Lie Lasts Forever, I really love the idea. And what happened was I wrote that in about 4 or 5 years. And then as events unfolded, one of those standalones got picked up by a small publisher. And I won't go into the whole timeline, but one small publisher led to the next small publisher, and soon I had 5 books out in the Alice and Coyle mystery series, which I really enjoyed promoting and getting out there for almost 8 or 9 years. And that whole time I had this book, No Lie Lasts Forever, in the background. Just I'd pull it out from time to time and work on it. And of course, I was applying everything I knew and had learned about writing suspense, trying to build suspense. I would pull it out and say, "Oh, I think I've figured out something different about, I don't know, dialogue, or now I have a different style of approaching characterization or whatever it might be." So I kept working on that book. And again, the blow by blow is certainly very boring, but after the mystery series was complete, I approached an agent with No Lie Lasts Forever, and she liked it a lot. And we spent a few months improving it and getting it ready for market. And then she said, "Look, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'm leaving crime fiction. I'm going to go to young adult. I will send you over to my boss, who doesn't, the guy who leads the agency. she said to me, he doesn't have to keep you. Even though you're with this agency now, he does not have to keep you. And I said, I understand that.
Yeah,
Josh Getzler, liked the book a lot. And again, he said, I'll represent No Lie Lasts Forever. And then, like, we started working on ideas on how to improve it, make it even better. And one day I got the idea for the baseball novel, and I called him up and I told him this idea for a baseball novel. And he said, Whoa, hold the horses. He said, We're going to put No Lie Lasts Forever on the shelf. You write the baseball book. That's a much better book to take out. A couple years happen. I write the baseball book. The pandemic happens. Again, all the details blow by blow. So it wasn't until a year ago, about now, that the book No Lie finally went to its first editor after 20, last year was 23 years since I started writing it. And she
that's
loved it.
wild.
She loved it. And she read it in one sitting and made an offer. And so all along the way, to answer your question, I kept applying things I'd learned. I can pull out No Lie and
Yeah.
just keep going through it, tightening it, hopefully making it better.
Yeah, that's crazy, like, over a span of 24 years, you just kept revisiting and revisiting. Because that's I can't imagine how much you've grown as a writer too, like, amongst
Totally.
that span. Oh,
You, you know, that you grow, you absolutely grow. If you don't find a way to improve, then you're not paying attention, I guess.
yeah,
Because
or
you
you're
want to
just
get,
stubborn.
yeah, you want to get more efficient. You want to get more clear and accurate and be more truth telling about your stories. And you find ways to, I think, give them to elevate every aspect of what you're trying to do. So I feel very fortunate that I didn't try to just race it out there. I kept revisiting it and trying to improve it. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, and I imagine so that was, like so No Lie Lasts Forever is just unique in your repertoire of your published works, because there's no other any of your works are quite like it in the process like that, right?
No, there's actually another book my agent has, which is the very first book I wrote. Now, that one has gone to, I think it went to a few editors, but again, that went to those editors 35, 40 years ago. And I'm still love that plot and I love that story. And I hope that one emerges into the light of day at some point. So that was a book I wrote in the 1980s, which is really hard for me to even say out loud. But
Mm,
in the meantime, the No Lie Less Forever, they've asked for it to be a two and maybe a three book series. So I've had to quickly work on a sequel. Yeah.
okay, okay, I was gonna say, because like, you can easily just because of the investigative nature of the story, those are usually easily continuing the life of Flynn or and her colleagues and her
Right.
network. You can easily carry on her story, her conflicts, her explore that whole universe as you will. Yeah, I definitely agree. That's really cool that you can, like, just see what you do with it. Did you ever think of that? Did you already have kind of ideas of where to go with it, but now you're like, "Oh, I gotta think about this now," you
Not
know?
it. Yeah, in my mind, it was a pure standalone. It was over and done with. And I agree with you completely. It would be pretty easy to just give her take as a character and her people she works with and apply them to a news story. What happened was my editor said, we want to keep the same general thing going that you started in book one with serial killers. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know where it would go, but I think we came up with an approach that will work. So I just turned in the sequel actually today's Thursday on Monday. So in early
Oh,
April.
nice.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah.
And I'm
So
surprised your editor said she finished it in one sitting or one day because it's a pretty chunky book. It's a chunk oh, hold on, I have it there in the
yeah.
corner here. I was like, "Oh, it's a chunky" yeah.
It's got some, yeah, let's see. It's four, almost 445, I think, something like that.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of
yeah.
white
But
space. Once you, there's
oh,
a lot of,
yeah, the chapters, the short chapters, and yeah,
yeah,
like the white space, it's spaced out to where I was like, "Oh, wait, I'm already on this page already?" I was just like
yeah,
flipping in the zone, and before I knew it, I was like halfway through, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I just think it's kind of funny, like, I could see how, like, she would get sucked in and just, like, whip through it, but it's a chunky one, so I'm kinda like, "Oh, okay, that's very that's impressive." You had her then, you had
She
her
was
engaged.
okay. She was on a flight from cross country flight, so maybe I had her trapped.
Oh, so you had her
Yeah,
undivided attention no matter. So, hopping back into exploring the mindset of a serial killer, like, how did your research go? Because I imagine, for lack of better words, I would hope you wouldn't know what some of these things are like, or I don't know, because I think in your background too, you used to be, like, a news reporter, right? Am I
yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Yeah, so what was, like, things that were, like, already in your brain, like procedures or whatever? What kind of research or consulting did you do? Did you have to Google questionable things? Like, how did you approach the research?
I can, I will answer the question. I can tell you that this is going to be my memory from 24 years ago. I can also answer partly because in the last 10 months writing the sequel, I've had to do a lot of refresh on
Mm,
serial killers. In terms of the television reporter, just quickly, I did spend 6 years producing television news, so I had a pretty good idea of that news gathering side from the TV side. But nonetheless, because the industry keeps changing so much in terms of the technology, I had to go
yeah,
back and I spent a day with some local a television reporter in Denver, and I spent a couple of days actually just watching her work and watching the flow of the newsroom and things like that. And even between 2016, 17, I've had to go back and make sure all the television technology side of it was accurate. The serial killer stuff, when in 2001, Google wasn't quite as robust and the whole
mm,
online search thing wasn't quite as robust. But I think a lot of us by then have, if you're crime fiction or any kind of television movie fan at all of dark storytelling, you've probably consumed many serial killer stories and books, whether it's Silence of the Lambs or things like that, where I can't really tell you in 2001 exactly what I did. I would be making it up if I pretended I could recall from that this long ago exactly what I did. So I can't. But I just know my basic process is to read as much as I can, both on the nonfiction side, behavioral analysis, understanding criminal justice and how they approach behavior profiling, things like that, and then also
yeah,
reading fiction from whether it's James Elroy or just somebody like that who really has a master at capturing the criminal mind, and then deciding and being creative and coming up with your own character and trying as much as you can to create a character, because I do think the idea of somebody who's wanting to go down in history as having been a successful retired serial killer, that was a little bit different. And one guy in particular was the BTK killer in Wichita, Kansas, who really was a horrible person. He was a church elder. The BTK killer was a church elder and was very well known in town. And the only reason he ultimately got caught after a long time where he had stopped was he started taunting the police. And had he not taunted the police and had they come after him, he probably would have retired successfully and gone to his grave not having been caught. And that
that
case
is
really
wild.
captured my imagination. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah, because there's definitely a handful of references and comparisons from PDQ to BTK, and I just yeah, it's like the morbid curiosity, right? It's like, why do we get into true crime? Why is true crime podcasts and documentaries? Why are those, like, so watchable and so bingeable or so consumable? Like, why do we want to know? Like, why are we so fascinated by? And I think it's just, at least for me, I was on it for a while before I got sucked into my audiobooks. I think it's the fascination of it, and it's the storytelling, because you can't really, like, relate, or at least any sane, healthy minded person wouldn't. We just can't really fathom, like, what would drive, like, what's going on in their brain, what's their motivation, like, what is the reasoning, and, like, I've read studies about it, and it's like there are things that you could there's cycles where this has been in the PDQ's background, is like he was allegedly beaten, abused, violently beaten by, like, his parent, by his father, and he didn't feel like he had any support or defense from his mother, who was an alcoholic. And so it's like leading, okay, our childhood environments, nature versus nurture, all that. But then it's to be said, I think you bring this up in the story too, that can be said that unfortunately, there are plenty of people who endure horrible childhoods or upbringings and environments, and they don't grow up to be that sadistic.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's like, why are we so curious? Why does it fascinate us? And I think it's just because it's so bizarre and unbelievable, and not easily understandable or relatable.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there in terms of things to discuss in terms of why we consume this, why we find it interesting. And I think there's part of us that kind of wants to watch stories about serial killers, nonfiction, true crime, like you say, and try to pick up how can I prevent this? How does somebody get into that situation as a victim? Unfortunately, the vast majority of victim being women. How do I avoid that kind of scenario? What do I know to look for? So I think there's part of us wanting to learn from these true crime stories. And yeah, I think the other part of it is just the sheer spectrum of human behavior and trying to fathom that. I think you could make an argument that there really should be a much more intense federal national effort at stopping these guys before they get going. And in fact, the one of the interesting things I found out recently is the number of serial killer cases is way down from the 80s and 90s. So the behavioral profiling, the iPhones, the ability to track anybody and where they are has really led to a decline. They believe that's one of the major reasons for the decline in serial killer cases, but still I think there are 90 or 100, something like that, active serial cases out there right now. So why shouldn't we be applying everything we've got to somebody who's randomly killing individuals?
And I think, wasn't it like there's a couple serial killers that it took so long to catch them because it was multi-state. And these bureaus, these enforcement agencies, they weren't communicating with each other. But how would they have known? Like, how would they have known, oh, is there similar patterns going on thousands of miles away or across the border or something like that? So that's like another thing that you're absolutely right. There should be like some sort of like federal tracking of, or at least more
And
effort into
there is
systems.
some.
But yeah.
You could argue that it needs a much more heavy investment. And there's even in-state where if a guy's moving around, if there's in-state cooperation and sharing of information, because you might have a case in Northern California that looks strange and bizarre, and there's some little undercovered case 500 miles away, and the two jurisdictions don't put them together.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's so wild to me. Just like the bigger picture, once you realize it, it's once people narrow it down, it's, oh, it's almost too late. So I want to explore Flynn's character. I liked her even though she annoyed me at certain times. Like, I was just so curious about her because I was like, what is she doing? And like, what's like, she's got her life where she's divorced. She's like sharing custody of her 10-year-old son, who very impressionable, smart, mature for a 10-year-old. And I think I just thought she's going through a rough time, and she's because of her situation. And then yeah, like she's trying to redeem herself, but she's still, I got the sense that she was still struggling to, she definitely faced a lot of internal conflict. And I think I just, to me, at a certain point, I wasn't able to, what is she gonna wait, what is she going with this? What is she doing? But I definitely appreciate her as a character. So I wanna explore like how you developed her. Was it just like certain personality traits or situations or whatever that you picked up in your career, previous career, or I don't know if you just let Flynn tell you what Flynn's gonna do, stuff like that. I kinda wanna explore like how, how you came up with her and stuff and her motivations.
Yeah, I've had the good fortune of working with some really tough reporters, male and female, who just are driven to get to the bottom of whatever the story is. These are not surface level reporters by any stretch of the imagination. They really dig and they don't put up with just BS. They just don't. and they're not going to, they never will. And with Flynn, she's a veteran. She's been around. She's in her late 40s. She's seasoned. She didn't, she thought she graduated from covering crime when she gets pulled into that opening scene. She is a little full of self-doubt about her relationship capabilities because of the divorce, but she also knows that marrying a cop was not the right thing for her to do. And that's why she had to break off with Max, but I think they still have a good, solid, mutual respect relationship. And then there's also her father. Her father is a very well known print reporter, was before he retired. And she's looking up to him and his reputation and career, which was pretty impeccable in terms of his ability to dig into really meaningful stories. And so she's a little living in his shadow as well. So just all those factors, and particularly some of these reporters who I used to travel with when I was a television news reporter. I was traveling around the country quite a bit with one particular woman, but several also. There was a couple of guys who were just tenacious, and they'd spend 18, 19 hours of every day just thinking about the problem they were working on. And I wanted to bring that. I wanted to be her to be as tough as if it was like the most grueling athletic competition. She's just relentless. I think in the next book, while this book, she's not actually reporting that much because she's been suspended. She's doing more criminal investigations. In the next book, you'll really see her do, much more reporting, which also leads to uncovering some bad stuff.
Yeah, yeah, she is. She's kinda but that's how because she is seasoned and you had to show that. She's experienced, and then she's also got, like, a legend as a father, like, a legend in his own right, and where his they're both of their names carry, and I loved and appreciated that relationship, that father-daughter relationship, because it wasn't just she wasn't necessarily, like, looking yes, she was looking up to him, but she was also like, "Dad, like, what I'm stumped here. What do I do? What would you do?" And it's just to have that resource and have that comfort and have that familiarity from a parent to be like, "Okay, come on, kiddo. What do you do next? Tell me, like, how are you gonna look at this?" And it was just so funny to see their different approaches because it's like the old generation working with the newer, not the newer generation, but the next below him to try to like figure things out and just give some support, which, you know, may or may not have been a good move by her because she was explicitly told not to, but then you had to if she listened to your advice, then there would be no book, right? Be like, "Flynn, what he told you to do this by yourself," then there would be no story, like, almost. You couldn't, like, have everything go smoothly and, "Okay, here you go, all done, pretty little package." No, things have to get messy. You gotta piss the antagonist off. You gotta find a way to fuel him into needing to take that a step further and find a way to punish her and threaten her and getting too close and showing how close and how much he knows and how much he can find out and just to get to motivate her to or threaten her to follow his rules. And then it was interesting because he's probably as a serial killer, he's like very in control. He's got his process. He like doesn't really stray far away from that except there was one where he lost his touch a couple
Yeah,
times, at least, in the past and then in the present too.
right.
He lost his touch, and I just thought that was so interesting because he probably, like he's so used to being in control and having his process down to a T, and then the second that it's not being followed, that's, like, triggering for him. He's like that he reverts back to his basement brain or what did
Yeah,
you call it?
the basement
Because he
brain. That's it.
yeah, like, he
Basement brain.
compartmentalizes it, yeah,
Yeah.
and I thought that was so fascinating where it's just like it's a cool way to look at it, and just to be like, "Oh, oh, hell no. Wait a second. It's not going as it should be for him," and then that sets him off. It's so wild.
For the careful read because you got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
No, it really is, like, fresh in my brain. I literally finished it, like, today, so I was ready. I'm gonna throw this at you. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
Wow. I would definitely say the most challenging was that unraveling of Harry at the end, where he's lost it. And I'm trying to both have him lose it in terms of realizing that he's about to make a huge probably make a huge mistake. And he probably knows it, but he also knows what his other urges are telling him to do because he's reignited all his old urges. I think triggered is exactly right. Just by being out there and dealing with this, he's re-sparked everything in the old his old self. And so I think the challenging part was his psychology there, and also just making sure that the mechanics of the plot were all pretty tight in terms of how that last big chase was going down. That was a fight and a fun challenge just to try to piece all the little parts together there. And the most fun, I don't know. It's all it sounds crazy. I really enjoy every bit of it. I wouldn't write it otherwise. Seeing a television reporter come together on the page was just a lot of fun. I think I one of the cool things about writing a sequel is you've got all your characters and you've got your the whole ecosystem of your story already set. So you can watch Flynn get up and running again. And like I said earlier, this book started 23, 4 years ago. And to know that she was still a viable character now and having to pull her out and get her in motion for a sequel, it was fun to just remember her. And I know you were asking about the first book and not the sequel, but it's just fun to know you've got somebody who's, you know, how her brain works, you know what she's looking for, you know what her big fears are, you know what her big desires are. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just fresh off of finishing the second one, so it's your brain is, like, moving, looking
Yeah,
ahead, and still, like,
exactly.
in her second installment, like, you're still fresh off of that. It's understandable, but it is, it's kinda like looking forward and, like, how yeah, you enjoyed that, and then you're, like, bringing it you're looking forward with it. So, let me see here. What this I'll ask it anyway.
Yeah.
What do you hope readers get out of the story?
That's a great question. Entertainment is the main goal. I like to be my main goal when I read a book, or my hope every time I open a book, is I want to be enthralled and I want to disappear into the book and I want to be completely absorbed by everything and I want to be so immersed that if I happen to be gone for a few days from the book, I know when I come back, I know exactly where I am. And just that feeling of just caring so much about how things are going to go. But I think on a bigger level, I do think it's an interesting thing I think there's a national conversation we should be having about how we take care of each other's early childhood education in terms of just investing in early child care. I think there's a Mind Hunter by John Douglas talks about the one part of that where he talks about all the behavioral analysis stuff that's been going on. He looks into just what are the causes and what are the potential solutions. And one of the things he raises is with the economy today and with single parents and just how kids can be left alone, just not given that support, and just the data that shows in terms of income level and in terms of two
Mm.
parent households, you're just looking at a much different kind of kids that come out of those. And even with early childhood education and being much more attentive to our youth and giving youth everything that they need and want, which is key to how successful they're going to be. So and that's the kind of a stretch. I'm definitely not it's not a preachy book at all, but I think just putting it out there is generating some conversation, or I intend to generate some conversation as I chat about it, but mostly entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's yeah, there's definitely something to be said about that because there have just a with like child development, like if they have everything they need, then they should be able to develop how they're supposed to. But it's when there's scarce, like lack of resources, food, shelter, safety, security, when there's that lack of it, it wires their brains differently. So that's definitely something to be said about that. And these children, they grow up to be adults, and that's rewiring is going to do something and likely not for the best. And it's a shame because it's like a vicious cycle. Even it's just
Yep.
that's what they know, and then they have
Yeah.
no control over it. What advice do you have for Flynn? I would say maybe what advice do you have for Max, but I don't know if I care about him enough.
Nah, you don't.
Yeah,
He's
he's
never gonna
kinda
get her
just
back.
yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause you tease it a little bit, but then it's she's, like, very I get the impression that she considers it a couple times, so she's really n un so uninterested in it. She's just, "I'm just gonna focus on myself and my kid and keep this structure, this system going, my network going, and my point of contacts and all that." She just wants to maintain that, and she's not looking into rekindling everything. He's not horrible, but it's kinda yeah, I didn't really get in touch with him. I didn't really
Yeah.
connect with him. I felt a little bad, but at the same time, I didn't, like, for him because he's just there. But I
Mm.
like, what advice would you give to Flynn?
In terms of our relationships, just in general.
Just in general,
Yeah,
going
just in
forward,
general.
maybe try not to be too spoilery.
Yeah, I guess I'd tell her to just chill out a bit. Just dial it down a little bit. And she can definitely be abrasive and pushy. And I think for good reason, you can justify her reasons for being abrasive and pushy. And I think she's well motivated and has the right reason in mind. But if I were to coach her, I'd say you might go a little bit farther if you weren't quite so pushy. Just dial it down a touch.
Yeah. She needs a little bit of that, right? She needs a
Yeah,
little bit of herself to do her
yeah,
job and to do it well and to solve the problems, but she definitely yeah, she could dial it back a little
yeah.
bit to
Yeah, I know her well
kinda
enough to
find
know.
that balance.
I know her well enough to know she's not perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we can talk about if you however much you wanna share, we could talk about anything else you're working on that won't get you in trouble. What can we look forward to from Brooke Stevens?
In addition to hoping my editor enjoys the sequel and decides to publish it next year, she did give me a two-book contract, so theoretically she'll like the second book. I think it came off pretty well. In the meantime, or right before writing the sequel, I wrote a book set in the world of rock and roll that's more in the line of the Fireballer. It's more character based. And I'm really hoping my agent can find, he's shopping that right now as well. And I really think that's a powerful story about a guy who is plays with a band that is known for one song and one song only. And they are very successful. They travel all over the country, but they've gone from big jets to touring buses, and now they're in little vans driving around, but still wherever they go, he has to play this one song over and he's trapped. And he's just in this cycle of just, he wishes he could be more creative on stage and wishes he didn't have to bring out this same song every time. But the one kind of hidden fact is he didn't write the song. Everybody thinks he did, but he didn't write it. And then stuff happens.
Yeah. And then stuff happens. Oh, like,
Yeah.
beautiful setup.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself that you like more character driven then? I'm seeing that you maybe you switch back and forth a little bit, but even with the plot driven from No Lie Lasts Forever, there's a lot of characterization in that. I feel like you draw more drawn to the character stuff?
I think both have to do both. I think the character driven stuff has to make you feel like you're being tugged along. And I think the plot driven stuff, like a good crime fiction, still has to have a good character at the engine is the engine of the story. And if you don't have a character driving it, then what you have is a bunch of plot points and you don't really have a something that a reader can empathize with. I'm as surprised as anybody that I've written a non-crime fiction, The Fireballer. The Fireballer has done very well and I'm extremely proud of it. And I also think it moves along that you get the basic question pretty early on and you want to find out what happened because our main character gets in a lot of trouble pretty soon in terms of what's going to happen to his life. But yeah, once I took that leap and tried writing a character based story, I'd always had this idea about the because I go to rock shows and I see a band and I just think because I do play in a band and I play in cover bands and I sometimes will get tired of playing a song and I've only played it like 40 times. I've only played it like maybe 50 or 60 times. These guys have been touring for years and years and they've been playing the 200 nights a year, 150 nights a year and they're playing the same notes in the same order and trying to show that same enthusiasm that they did
Yeah.
40 years ago and I feel sad for them. and yet joyful. Good for them.
Yeah. I no, I'm right there with you because I don't play a musical instrument. I'm not in a band. But I know that whenever I go to shows or when like concerts and when bands or artists are on tour, I'm just that's something I definitely think about where it's so repetitive. They're playing the same set, talking about the same things, maybe the same like little clips in between sets here and there. And it's just like how it's I know that there's a part of them that like loves it and they wouldn't do anything else, but it's like how do you take care of yourself and like your brain and your psyche? Like how do you not go crazy like just going through the like the redundancy and then like you said, like keeping that same energy, that same enthusiasm for each city, each fan, each group that they visit and they perform for. It's just it's so crazy to me like how that happens and how demanding it could be.
Yeah, that's exactly the heart of that story. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay then. You know, I don't have to read it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Mark Stevens, where can we find you online and on social media?
Writer Mark Stevens is my website. I'm still on X/Twitter, and it's at Writer Stevens. Instagram, Mark54Stevens. TikTok, Mark54Stevens. So, yeah.
Cool, perfect. I know all those things are hard to keep up with. I'm like, so
Yeah.
I appreciate people who do their best to keep up with it, and so that
And
I could like.
Blue
So it's
Sky,
just ways,
Blue Sky
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Blue Sky,
Yeah.
yeah. That's for it's a social platform. I have to check it out because I know
It's
it's back too.
very similar to Twitter in the old days.
Okay.
It's a robust everything environment. I think there's probably a tenth of the number of people as there are on Twitter, but it is really a much cleaner environment and really good. Great writing community on Blue Sky.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. So, Mark Stevens, No Lie Lasts Forever, that comes out on June 1st. Thanks for chatting with me again. Thanks for your time. Thanks for answering, being authentic, and all that good stuff. If and whenever you're releasing your next project, whatever that may be, feel free to keep in touch. We could chat again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the great conversation. I really appreciate it.
And there you go. That was Mark Stevens talking about his book, No Lie Lasts Forever. That book is available on June 1st. Find links to purchase the book and where to find Mark online and on social media in the show notes. If you need book recommendations, check out cantinapub.com. I'm always posting stuff from any genre, whatever you guys are into. There's something for everyone. While you're at it, I'm also building up the YouTube, I'm building up the Patreon, so keep an eye out in case you're interested. You can donate as little as $1 a month to help and support Cantina Book Club and to check out everything that the YouTube channel has to offer. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.